Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. I'm hearing some background noises. Yeah. Apologies for the slight delay, but I think we are good to go now. I have the pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar focusing on national action plans and lessons learned. This webinar is actually organized by the Global Partnership on Nutrient Management, the GPNM, as part of a webinar series in the lead up to UNIA 6. My name is Sarah Iweke. I'm your moderator for today, and I work in the Source to Sea Pollution Unit at UNEP in Nairobi. And without further ado, it's with great pleasure that I introduce you now to the chair of the Global Partnership on Nutrient Management, Professor Ramesh Ramachandran, and I welcome him to officially open this webinar. Over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the time zone you are. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran from the chair of the Global Partnership on Nutrient Management. I'm happy to welcome you all in this very important webinar on national action plans and lesson learns, which is organized by the GPNM. I extend my sincere appreciation to each participant for your valuable time and commitment to addressing one of the most pressing global challenges, which is the nitrogen pollution. The UNEP Working Group on Nitrogen was established to facilitate the implementation of UNIA resolution, both UNIA 4.414 and UNIA 5.5.2 on sustainable nitrogen management. Today's discussion holds immense significance as we delve into the flexible framework developed under the Nitrogen Working Group, specifically focusing on the voluntary national action plans templates which was developed. The insights we gain from this framework will play a pivotal role in shaping our collective approach to sustainable nitrogen management. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the co-chairs, both Mihai and Purvaja, for their leadership and dedication in steering the working group on nitrogen. Our agenda today includes the valuable lessons from the two nations, the Netherlands and the Mauritius. A representative from these countries, both from the Netherlands and from the Mauritius, will share their experiences with the integrated approaches to nitrogen management. These insights are invaluable as they provide real-world examples of tackling nitrogen pollution, offering practical lessons that can provide us in developing effective and also adaptable strategies. This is followed by a question and answer session that allows a vital aspect of our dialogue. As we embark on this journey of knowledge sharing, let us keep in mind the global significance of our efforts. The nitrogen pollution poses multifaceted challenges affecting the ecosystem, the biodiversity, the climate, and the human health. The UNIA resolutions on sustainable nitrogen management underscores the urgency of our mission, emphasizing the need for international collaboration and coordinated action. In summary, I would like to express my gratitude to the UNEP, represented by Heidi, Stephanie, Sarah, Vanjru, and all other colleagues for their continued support and collaboration in organizing this webinar. Together, we also are committed to fostering international cooperation, developing knowledge and tools, and providing technical support to member states in the pursuit of sustainable nitrogen management practices. Thank you, and I very look forward to the enriching discussion ahead. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Ramesh, for setting the scene. We will now move on to the presentations, followed by a Q&A at the end of the webinar. So each panelist will make a presentation of around 15 minutes, and then we would have 15 minutes at the end for the Q&A. Of course, we would like this webinar to be as interactive as possible, so please feel free to put your comments and questions in the chat box, and we will be able to address those at the end. So I think we can start now with the first presentation. I'd like to present the first presenter, the co-chair of the UNEP Working Group on Nitrogen, who will highlight the flexible framework developed under the working group. Mr. Mihai Constantinescu has more than 15 years of experience in developing and implementing agricultural and rural development strategies and financing programs in Romania and Western Balkan, working for the Romanian Ministry for Agriculture, European Commission, and Danish International Development Agency. And Mihai joined the Romanian Ministry of Environment in 2017. Mihai, I hope you are online and can hear us. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Ramesh, for the kind words. As you know, we started early this year in January with the second meeting of the Nitrogen Working Group. And at the second meeting, we already presented a screening document meant to collect data from member states for the already implemented actions and other initiatives in the countries for the sustainable nitrogen of management. That document was very useful for the preparation of the zero draft of the National Action Plan template, which was first presented and debated at the third meeting of the working group in Bucharest. And then we started presenting further the template in Nairobi in the meeting that we had a few months ago, giving us the opportunity to consolidate it. We received inputs from various from various member states, and we had also bilaterals discussing technically the document. The document is uploaded on the UNEP website, so it's well known. And I would like now to present the document from different perspective. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing the document. I hope it's visible. A few general characteristics. The document is voluntary, so nothing as a whole, as a document or as a provision is not mandatory. It is not exhaustive at the same time, meaning that whatever we put there, if we look second time, we can see something that may miss for a specific region or country. But this is not an issue, as I will refer later. The document should be flexible enough to be adaptable at each member state. So it is not having provisions that are considered to be mandatory. And then again, the document is interinstitutional, meaning that is linked with the sectors, or if we think at government level, is linked with the line ministries or with the relevant ministries. At the end, I should mention that the document is a living document, meaning that we are all learning by doing, and we're supposed to update and upgrade the document from time to time. The next slide, please. My proposal for you is to go through 10 frequently asked questions that I received, and I think we should be able to clarify quite a lot through these questions. Questions that I received from different focal points in private, official, or semi-official discussions. The first question it is, we have very limited actions in place at national level. Do we need to adopt a national action plan? Well, I would say that in this case, it is recommendable for a country to adopt a comprehensive national action plan, because it starts basically from zero. And on long-term perspective, a national action plan properly adopted at the level of the government, and intentionally said government, not only ministry, because it's not only for one ministry. It gives substance and it gives consistency and coherence on really implementing the actions. On the other hand, there are countries having already actions in place. And then the second question is, how applicable is the national action plan for this type of country? Well, in case a country is already having various policies, like on nitrates or like on ammonia or like on phosphorus, there is no need, and climate change with nitrous oxide, there is no need for a comprehensive national action plan to be adopted. It may be the case that the country will find much more useful just to review and revise different policies and to try to integrate and move forward this way, because it will be too much administrative burden just to start over again, which is not the case. Third question, what if a provision is not fitting to my country needs or interests? Well, there is no problem. I mean, this is the whole idea, just to think at the National Action Plan template as a menu, just to take what is really fitting in the country needs and context. What if we have other actions in place which are not included in the National Action Plan template? Again, this is quite fine. There is no need to come back to the National Action Plan template with specificities that are really belonging to one or a few countries, because the meaning of the National Action template is to give the main flow and the main provisions, and not specificities linked with countries or regions or counties or regions from a country, not regions at global level. How may efficiently work with other relevant ministries, agencies, and research institutes? Well, maybe this, for a country which is just starting, I think this is one of the basic questions. And normally this is done through a committee or a commission at the government level or interministerial level. So normally countries even before starting the preparation of a national action plan should have this kind of committee where the line ministry or the relevant ministries for the country should organize together with the agencies and research institutes, contracted or state research institutes, a committee that I will discuss in the later slide. What should be the purpose of that? Is one of the recommendable ways of working. Next slide, please. What entity may lead the process? Well, normally it's the Ministry of Environment, but we have to keep in mind that the National Action Plan is not for the Ministry of Environment. It's for the sector. It's the Ministry of Environment normally should be the ministry that is just putting together all the actors. And a good way of balancing the process is to have like the president of the chair of the interministerial committee led by the Minister of Environment, but at the same time co-chairs and vice chairs should be from the relevant ministries. How can we collaborate with other countries? Well, this is critical. Normally the best example we may have is from the neighbor. And here, whatever a country is trying to do, I will very much encourage just to look over the fence, just to contact the nearby countries to see what was done, because there are quite a lot of lessons learned, and we should not repeat the mistake, and we should find inspirations from the nearby countries. And I hope for the future the nitrogen working group should help on this as well. Now it's on voluntary basis. What about in the future? Well, this is one of the concerns, that what we are having now, it will come as mandatory in the future. Well, we are not there. We are not there yet, and I don't see we'll be in a few years there. I believe that whatever we do, we should understand better, to see the implication, to organize better at the government level, and on discussions on what can become mandatory. I don't see it in the near or even in the medium term future. What's next? Well, this is the big question, and on what's next, we are all waiting to see the proposals for a new UNEA resolutions. And at least at the level of the nitrogen working group, we left ourselves guided by the by next UNEA resolutions on nitrogen. Next slide, please. I made 2 slides as well about the National Action Plan preparation, and another one about the National Action Plan implementation. And just going through the main steps, raising awareness at decisional level is pretty much important as a basic step. In order to put at the same table different representatives from different ministries, they will need to understand the process. And I know that this step takes time, and but is mandatory. In order to move forward, basic discussions focus on raising awareness should take place. Setting up the national legal framework, normally at government level, I was told that not in all the countries, but normally in administration, you should have a legal framework. So an interministerial committee should be somehow validated. There are different forms. Those that I know anyway are in somehow government decision, because it involves more line ministries. Identifying and involving the stakeholder as part of the committee that I was mentioning. This is again at the beginning of the process. I should mention as well, not to forget that private sector is important, and as agriculture is one of the most important sector in this equation, I would say that private sector from agriculture should be here, but not only transportation, energy, and so on, depending on the country context. Elaboration of the National Action Plan, there are different forms, but at the beginning there should be, and throughout the process, research institute should be involved. It's a technical task. Normally, elaboration is done through contracts, governmental contracts, employing the relevant research institutes, universities, and the delivery, the work is firstly evaluated by the committee where we're having stakeholders, and guided as well. It's like a steering committee. Consultation process, it refers to the first draft. Nothing should be approved without a wide public consultation, and consultation as well with other research institutes, consultation with the administration, the private sector, are processes that should be carefully given time, because a lot of positive input may come out of this. Adoption, there are different ways. Normally, the line ministry should adopt, like a common minister orders or even a government decision. But still, we should see that the interministerial committee should have somehow the role of endorsing technically that what was provided is acceptable. So not the government to approve without the prior endorsement of the interministerial committee. And we should have in mind as well future revisions, normally because of development of technology, normally in 3-4 years, the National Action Plan, once adopted, should be reviewed and revised. Next slide, please. Implementation, I would say, is the hard job at administration level. As is a new topic, awareness campaign across the country, going deeply in rural area and not only, and considering as well local administration. There is a need of an awareness strategy, and delivering it takes at least 3-4 years to properly implement this type of an awareness campaign. Institutional capacity building refers to investments and trainings at institutional level, also at private sector level, like it is the case of farmer organizations, farmer level. Investments may refer to piezometers, for example, water testings, equipment, laboratories, and trainings for the water agencies. Monitoring system, we should know, once we having an action plan with actions, we should know the impact, what's happening, if what was approved and implemented was leading to something or not. Controls and fines at national level, if the country will wish for, will consider that something is important. Normally on environment, there are some bodies that should control the compliance with environmental provisions. Again, as a recommendation, this is not mandatory, and probably now is the moment to say that at the beginning it's not recommendable to have controls and fines, but it's better to have awareness campaign and controls and fines maybe later in some years. Correlation with other policies. Normally each country is having a specific policy on agriculture and transportation, and whatever norms or subsidies we are applying, we should correlate what we are having here with other policies. And for example, I would rather see subsidies provided in case environmental conditionalities are respected, rather than subsidizing inputs like fertilizers. And the reporting is as well, monitoring and reporting is as well important, again, to have an analysis of what's happening, and as well to make it public. The next slide, please. Importance of an impact assessment, which should give the opportunity of the policymakers to steer. We should always look at the environmental impact versus economic impact. Maybe some actions will bring administrative burden, or maybe will bring too much cost at the level of those who have to implement from the private sector. So we should consider here as well, even from the beginning, and as well from time to time to consider these aspects. At the same time, there are synergies on existing actions. Normally, countries are having subsidies in agriculture, are having technical inspections for vehicles, are having conservation measures in protected areas, and whatever is done should be an environmental impact assessment as well, from the perspective of biodiversity, for example. It should be an economic impact assessment at the level of agriculture, or I don't know, transportation sector. So this multi-sectoral approach should not be dismissed. Next slide, please. Yes, and I believe I'm close to finishing my presentation. I wanted to give here different perspectives on the National Action Plan. So normally the scientists, as you know, they are very much focused from the perspective of pollutants or emissions like nitrates, ammonia, nitrous oxide, or NOxes. And they will have this type of language and this type of approach, which is quite fine and quite useful. At the level of the ministries of environment or environmentalists, the approach is somehow focused on effects, like on biodiversity, looking at the nutrients excess and looking if it leads or not to eutrophication or climate change or air pollution and human health as well, because of nitrates is something else as well. Anyway, this is the approach at the level of the environment protection, and you will hear this type of language, and you will recognize somehow the person experience is coming from this direction. Well, if we are at administration level, and if we want to have a certain impact at government level, and we should think more in terms of sectors like agriculture, transportation, energy, environment, if we consider marine waters protection and so on. But somehow the working group and the National Action Plan stayed a bit more between the environmentalistic approach and the policymaker approach. And anyway, what I want to underline is that if we are taking the sectors out, it will be detrimental to the National Action Plan. So we have to consider sectors if we want to make a change at the government level. Otherwise, if we speak on nutrients, we can speak quite a lot, but without having without looking at wastewater treatment and without looking at agriculture, I mean the source of excess of nutrients in waters, they will not be able at governmental level, at member state level to make any change. So here I'm trying just to present the different perspectives and to understand why the National Action Plan is having not only hints but direct connections with the sectors. And we should think as well in the future that if we want to continue looking at making a difference at governmental level, we should consider sector and always include sectors and link the pollutants with the effects on environment with the sectors. I think this is all from my side. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Mihai, for providing this overview on the Voluntary National Action Plan and the frequently asked questions associated with it. You made reference to interministerial coordination, so I'm just flagging here that the next webinar by the GPNM will actually be held on the 13th of December, and the topic would actually be on interministerial and interdepartmental coordination. So of course we will get back to all of you with some further information. And as you mentioned also, certainly we're also looking forward to receiving further guidance from member states on the whole topic of nutrients at the upcoming 6th UN Environment Assembly. But before that, we'll now move to the two national examples, starting with our two speakers from the Netherlands, who will present lessons learned from implementing an integrated approach on nitrogen. I hope, yes, they are both online. Bart Hermans and Svenja Hovelman, they work for the Dutch Ministry of Agriculture and Food Quality at the Department of Strategy for Rural Areas and Nitrogen in Policy Development. Please, the floor is yours.
Hello, can you see the presentation? I hope so.
We are just seeing your screen, but not the presentation yet.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Excuses for the delay. I think now it should be shared.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much.
Perfect. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Svenja Heuvelman, and together with my colleague Bart Hermans from the Directorate General Rural Areas and Nitrogen of the Dutch Ministry of Agriculture, Nature, and Food Quality, we're going to present you today the integrated approach of the Netherlands to tackle the nitrogen problem. And I will provide you with a short introduction and the background into the context of why the nitrogen problem in the Netherlands is so pressing and urgent. And then my colleague will continue to explain the development of the integrated approach and what it includes, as well as the most important challenges and the lessons learned. And we will end with some concluding remarks. So starting at the very basis, reactive nitrogen is a chemical compound that is found in the air and soil. In naturally occurring quantities, it provides indispensable nutrients for nature. However, in excess, reactive nitrogen has harmful effects. And the main reactive nitrogen compounds that humans emit through numbers of different sources into the atmosphere are nitrogen oxides, also called NOx, and ammonia, NH3. And when these emissions settle from the air and accumulate in the soil, we are talking about nitrogen deposition. An excessive nitrogen deposition in nature areas affects the functioning of ecosystems profoundly and causes a decline in biodiversity. And now to provide some context on the country's situation, the Netherlands is a very small country, roughly 237 times smaller than the US, but has a very high population density, the second highest in the European Union, counting around 17.5 million inhabitants. Therefore, highly concentrated industry, transport, construction, and agricultural sector have led to an excessive nitrogen deposition for the past decades. While industry and transport are the biggest emitters for nitrogen oxides, the agricultural sector accounts for almost 10% of the Dutch economy and employment, and is the largest source for ammonia emissions. While both forms of nitrogen emissions have declined due to various measures throughout the past decades, they remain at a very critical excess level and present a pressing challenge to the Netherlands today.
Thank you, Svenja. My name is Bart Hermans, and I will present a little bit more about the regulatory approach that we have in the Netherlands. The Netherlands is as a member of the European Union is also bound to EU regulations to protect birds and habitats. That's a very important regulatory framework that's applicable to all European member states. But as Svenja already mentioned earlier, we are a very dense country. So for us, it becomes more problematic because also we have a lot of nature areas that we are bound to protect. So in the map, you see, for example, the colors in dark green and in where like the nature reserves are that we have to protect also according to European obligations. So at this moment we have like 162 Nature 2000 areas, because that's how they are called, the nature areas that we need to reserve, and 118 of them are not in a good condition. And the rules oblige us to avoid further deterioration of these areas by a reduction of deposition in the form of either nitrogen oxide or ammonia. So there's really there are binding rules that we have to reduce these emissions in order to protect our nature reserves. We had a system in place that we called the PAS, which kind of combined ecological objectives in protecting the nature, but also enabling economic activities. for example, in the agricultural sector, that farms could grow bigger, or we could build houses or infrastructure. However, in 2019, the highest court in the Netherlands ruled that the system we had in place was invalid, which meant that we allowed too much nitrogen to be released and too much nitrogen deposition to happen, and we did not do enough to protect the nature reserves in the Netherlands, and we did not fulfill the obligations that the European rules set for us. So that's why we started an integrated approach to tackle this problem, and we call this approach the National Program for the Rural Areas. And there are a few pillars that are behind the philosophy of this program. That's that we choose for an integrated approach, because of course nitrogen and nature are objectives. We need to reduce nitrogen and protect the nature, but also for the water quality and for the challenges in climate change, also gives us objectives that we need to fulfill. So we thought rather than doing it all separately, we want to make one approach to tackle all these three challenges together. Another very important part of our national program is that we made it area orientated. So it's not that we decide from The Hague, where the government is, one program that applies everywhere in the Netherlands, but we also really look to the specific characteristics in certain areas and provinces. In the north, the problems are different than in the south. For example, that's because of the soil there, the type of agriculture that takes place there. So we really want to look into the specific characteristics of an area. And we want to make an approach that is future-proof, that also provides a long-term perspective for all actors involved, and in particular the agricultural sector, because the transition that we need to establish will also ask a lot of our farmers that they have to produce less or more sustainable. So we really also want to make a perspective also for farmers, how they in the future can continue their practices. And finally, also very important part of our program is that we also look into the social, economic and cultural aspects of it. This transition that we try to establish with the national program really can have a severe impact, especially in areas where now there's a lot of nitrogen or a lot of agricultural activity. It can really change the economic structure of such an area. So we also really look into how we can address these effects. Important for the area-oriented approach, as I said, like the soil and water characteristics of the region are leading. And very important also is that the 12 Dutch provinces, they are really in the lead to make plans for their specific provinces to meet the objectives. So it's not only centralized in The Hague, but it's really, we do it together with the provinces. Well, we also distinguish in the transition objectives for the short, long, and medium term. The short term, what we actually are working on now is really to make big steps to reduce nitrogen emission and deposition on short term by like a significant amount. So we now announced a few buyout schemes in which the biggest agricultural companies that make a lot of emissions can end their farm, and then we as a government buy them out. So they have to stop their farms, but we compensate them for it. In the medium term are the plans that the provinces are making right now. So every province has submitted their first draft plan on how to achieve the nitrogen, water, and climate goals in their province. And these plans have they go until 2030. So it's really the midterm. And for the long term, we're also looking at like how can we transform the agricultural sector into climate neutral, and how can we also give more perspective to the agricultural sector also on the long term, how they can change their business models to also become more sustainable, also in an economical sense for the long term. Well, there are some challenges. First of all, the economic challenge I have to address, because when the Dutch highest court deemed our previous approach illegal, it also meant that now at this point it's very difficult to provide a permit for construction or constructing houses or infrastructure or agricultural activities. So economically seen, this is very, has a very big impact. So if we don't solve this problem, it will also have adverse economical effects. This also made it a very political issue. It's since 2019 really very prominent on the political agenda in Den Haag. So yeah, that really provides also challenges in how to develop an approach that has enough effects and that we can really, on the one hand, improve the nature and protect the nature, and on the other hand, also make available, enable economic activities again. We have to find a balance between different policy tracks. There are some innovation solutions that can help farmers to emit less nitrogen, but also some of the farmers, maybe they want to stop by using a buyout scheme. So it's really, there are different types of solutions: innovation, extensivation, and buying out or terminating farms. And a combination of this is going to approach that we are going to do. And we are not only looking into farmers, but also to other sectors that produce nitrogen, for example, in infrastructure or in the or industry. Well, this approach also led to protests, especially amongst farmers, because for them it will have a high impact. So we've seen a lot of farmer protests the last years against these government policies. So it's very important also in our future approach that we keep on engaging also with the agricultural sector about the plans that we are making and how we can also provide a perspective for the agricultural sector. Yeah, and as I said, like the protests are especially amongst farmers, but also wider in society. There are like ongoing debates about how to tackle this problem, and also what course the government should follow. So it's a very hot topic, I would say, in the Netherlands. And also this affects the socio-economic conditions of the rural areas, the bridge between the country, like the gap between the countryside and the more densely populated city areas. So this all comes together in this subject. So these are the challenges we face in tackling the situation in the Netherlands. Well, what did we learn from this so far? Well, what we really learned, I think that's the first and maybe most important lesson, is that reducing nitrogen emissions and really protecting our nature is really necessary to allow any economic activities. Because before we give priority to developing more economic activities and not do anything about nature protection or restoration. And then the judge said that was not enough to fulfill the European obligations. So that is really a lesson we learned the hard way, I would say, in May 2019. So we really need to find a balance between ecology and economic and economy, and this really requires that we set like really clear and accountable objectives, and also foresee them with that we take measures to really achieve it. And the third lesson we learned is that we really try to integrate challenges. So it's not only about nitrogen and nature quality, it's also about climate change and water quality. So we really need to find solutions that fits all these three different challenges. And we really have to look to the specific characteristics of a certain area. So that's why we chose the area-specific approach. So conclusion, maybe to wrap some things up. Like the geographical conditions of the Netherlands and like the density of our country, combined with the intensity of protected nature reserves and agricultural activities, makes the nitrogen problem very pressing and urgent. Currently, most of our Nature 2000 reserves are not in a good condition, and that means that we have to act, because as a result, obtaining approvals for new economic activities are much more challenging than before. And as I said earlier, our approach focuses on more than only nitrogen, but also water and climate, and also looks to the socio-economic consequences on the long term. So I think that was, in a nutshell, the problems we have in the Netherlands, and also the policies we put in place to address them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Svenja and Wat, for your comprehensive overview from the Netherlands and how to, well, essentially implement integrated approaches in managing nitrogen sustainably. I think you also highlighted very well, the cross-cutting nature of nitrogen. So yeah, thank you for that. I'm also using this opportunity briefly for participants to post their questions in the chat. Please feel free to do so. We have the Q&A coming up after our next presentation. So now allow me to take you to the warm waters of the Indian Ocean. Our two speakers from Mauritius will now provide lessons learned from their national context. We have Devendranath Dindyal online. He's the Divisional Scientific Officer and responsible for the General Administration and Management of the National Environmental Laboratory. And also with us today is Ravina Brismahoon, the Senior Scientific Officer at the National Environmental Laboratory of the Ministry of Environment, Solid Waste Management and Climate Change in Mauritius. I hope you can hear and see me both, and I
Yes.
over to you. Excellent.
Thank you, Sarah.
Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah. I hope everyone can hear me.
We can't see you, but we can
Just,
hear you.
My camera is on.
The camera appears to be loading or not working at the moment. I see Ravina.
Yes, I can see you. Hi, Sarah.
In fact, she's going to present first. She's going to present the first part of the presentation, and then I will take over for the second part. So I will leave the floor to her.
Okay, excellent. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I hope you can see my presentation.
Not yet, Ravina. You do have presenter rights to share your screen.
Yes.
It's loading. Yes, it's working. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll give a presentation on nitrogen management in Mauritius. So I'll begin the presentation with a brief introduction on Mauritius, and then my colleague Devendranath will continue with the rest of the presentation. So Mauritius is a small island developing state in the African continent, and the capital being Port Louis. We have an area of 2,040 square kilometers with a population of 1.2 million inhabitants and an exclusive economic zone of 2.3 million square meters. And in terms of the agriculture sector for the year 2022, sugarcane is the main crop of the country, and it covers an area of 392 square kilometers. And we have tea plantation and other food crops as well. And in terms of livestock, I'll just provide some statistics to have an idea of how livestock is in Mauritius. So every year it's on the increase. For example, the beef production from live cattle was 2,071 tons, which is 13.6% higher than last year. Production of goat meat and mutton as well is 55 tons in 2022. Similarly for pork, which was 583 tons, and poultry as well, 55,700 tons in 2022. In terms of fertilizer use in Mauritius, the total number of tons imported by the country was 26,266 tons. We also produce a very minimal amount locally, but it's mostly from vinasse, which is from sugarcane. Otherwise, we import all the fertilizer. And now I provide some statistics for the energy industry and transport sector. In terms of energy, coal is the highest percentage of imported fossil fuel in Mauritius. That's for the production of energy, and followed by fuel oil. Other sources include diesel oil, gasoline, kerosene, and liquefied petroleum gas. And renewable sources of energy in the country comes mainly from bagasse, which is a byproduct of the production of sugarcane. And other sources include photovoltaic, hydropower, wind, landfill gas, and fuel wood. And in terms of industry in Mauritius, manufacturing is the main industrial activity. We also have a small percentage of mining and quarrying, and electricity and gases, and also water supply and sewerage. In terms of transport, we annually around 623,000 vehicles are registered in the country, and the fuel consumption by motor vehicles amounts to 191 million liters of diesel and 226 million liters of gasoline. And I'll now give a brief of the sources of nitrate in the environment, Mauritius. The natural origin will be from soil, and the anthropogenic sources come from mainly from nitrogen-based fertilizers, but also from domestic sewage, animal manure, livestock, vehicular emissions, industrial discharge from the wastewater and stack emissions, and also on atmospheric deposition. And regarding the legislation on wastewater discharges in Mauritius and air quality, we have a Wastewater Management Authority Act 2000, and it comprises of 6 regulations which cater for disposal of wastewater. We have an industrial waste audit for pollution control, and we also have a National Environmental Standard Guidelines and Regulation, which is part of the Environment Protection Act. And this is mainly one of the main duties of a National Environmental Lab. We ensure compliance to these standards. We have an effluent discharge permit. And for the air quality, we have our ambient air quality standards, which is currently being revised at the moment. And regarding the use of chemical and organic fertilizer, we have a Chemical Fertilizer Control Act, which regulates the sale and control of fertilizer. And for the solid waste management, we have a Waste Management and Resource Recovery Act, which has recently been enacted, and its main purpose is to enable circularity principles in waste management. I'll now leave my colleague to continue the presentation. To you, Mr. Lindial. Mr. Lindial, can you hear me?
I think you can you hear me now?
Yes, we can
Yes,
hear you. We still can't see you, but we can hear you.
I think the camera is not working, but
No problem.
I will share the presentation.
Thank you.
I hope everyone can hear me and see me now and see the presentation now. Okay, so what I'm going to speak about
sorry,
today
Mr. Lindial, we can hear you, but we can't see the presentation.
Okay, I just put it. Can you see it now?
Not yet. Otherwise,
Now
my
can you
colleague
see?
can share it.
Yes, maybe I will share it and Mr. Lindial will present it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to present a little bit about the environmental monitoring of nitrates in water and air. So in fact, in Mauritius, we already have routine monitoring programs. We don't only focus on nitrates, but we also focus on several other parameters. So we have a routine monitoring, which is done by several governmental institutions. We have the Wastewater Management Authority, which is mostly responsible for all wastewater management that is released in the sewer network in Mauritius. Then we have the Central Water Authority, which is responsible for the distribution of water in Mauritius. but they do mostly testing for surface and groundwater at abstraction points. We also have the National Environmental Laboratory where we work, and then our responsibility is mostly on the environmental side. So we have a routine monitoring program for surface, ground, and air quality monitoring. We also have the Ministry of Blue Economy. We have the Albion Fisheries Research Center and the Mauritius Oceanography Institute. They also have a monitoring program for coastal water and environment and marine environment monitoring. So we also have a few projects which we have undertaken with the collaboration of international organizations like the International Atomic Energy Agency. As from 2005, they have started to collaborate with us, and we have started to use stable isotope techniques in groundwater and surface water pollution investigation. And currently, we have set up an isotope hydrodissection unit in our laboratory. And recently, we have acquired 2 laser spectrometers. This is helping us in groundwater investigations. And we intend to acquire a laser 15 nitrogen analyzer. This will help us in determining the exact source of nitrogen that is contaminating ground and surface water. On the other side, for the air quality, we have a network which is established with 10 stations. And these stations, they are generating ambient air quality data for sulfur dioxides, ozone, particulate matter, carbon monoxides, and more specifically in our case, like oxides of nitrogen. And these data, they are being generated and also being computed to compile for an air quality index. Next slide, please. Then in 2019, we had the Master Plan Environment. This was a national consultation with all the stakeholders, the major stakeholders in Mauritius. The idea was to draw on a roadmap like for environmental protection and to devise the strategy that we need to address on the environmental side. So we came up with the master plan in 2022, and it was approved by our Council of Ministers for implementation. And the implementation timeline is up to 2030. So we have barely like 6 years left for the implementation of the master plan environment. So in our case, what is most important here is that with regards to wastewater, the environmental impacts associated to wastewater, we need to do some assessment of the impact of wastewater and groundwater quality and on coastal water quality. And this we are already doing, as I mentioned, government laboratories are already involved in a routine monitoring program. But most importantly, how to address the wastewater issue is that we need to extend the coverage of our sewerage networks in regions specifically where wastewater is impacting on groundwater and coastal water quality. Secondly, we also need to mitigate on environmental pollution and promote food safety by upscaling sustainable agricultural practices for both crop and livestock sectors. This we intend to establish by establishing a sustainable supply chain for food crops cultivated through sustainable agricultural practices. We also intend to do it by promoting sustainable processing of livestock waste for biofertilizer production with a view to mitigate the leaching of nitrates into groundwater and to cater for other nuisances. We also intend to encourage recycling of animal waste for production of biofuel. This is something that is already underway. And so also we need to strengthen the access and capacity of farmers to acquire good agricultural practices certification. In Mauritius, we call it the MORIGAP certification. Also, in association with the Ministry of Agriculture and the private sector, we at the level of the Ministry of Environment, we intend to provide incentive. For example, the sale of biofertilizers at a cheaper price to farmers to encourage the adoption of sustainable practices. Now we'll talk a little bit about the public investment programs that are in place in Mauritius. So with regards to the National Sewerage Program, some years ago, some 20 years ago, that is at the beginning of the 21st century, we divided the National Sewerage Program. The intention was to connect 80% of the population to the sewerage network by 2033. But as at December 22, we know that only 28.35% of the household is now connected to the public sewerage system. So 71% of the population are currently using on-site disposal system like septic tanks, absorption pits, and cesspits. We now have a revised objectives, that is to connect 50% of the sewer connection by 2030. Currently, 52 million meter cube of treated wastewater is being generated. Out of these, 700 and something like meter cube of wastewater is only being used for irrigation purposes. This is a very small fraction. The rest, although being treated, is unfortunately being discharged in the marine environment. We also have a number of other smaller stations which are also treating like wastewater. On the transportation side, Mauritius is currently implementing a light railway transit system. This has been implemented. It's already some 5 years, and the network coverage is increasing. Hopefully, this will bring about a more sustainable method of displacement for the population in the years to come. But unfortunately, for the time being, it's still dependent on electricity produced by coal. I will now talk a little bit about hotels and industries. As you know, Mauritius is very popular as a touristic destination. So we have many hotels and many visitors, especially tourists in Mauritius. It's like almost double the population throughout the year. So we have many hotels. So what are these hotels doing with all the wastewater that they are generating? Currently, the policy is that every hotels above room capacity of 50, they have to treat their wastewater and then use it for irrigation. So this is something that is regularly being done by all the hotels, even the ones which have a lesser number of rooms than 50. Also for industries, with regards to our Environment Protection Act, they are all subjected to environmental impact assessment. So we have an EIA committee also which is imposing the conditions with regards to all their emissions, be it on the air quality side or the water quality side. And then eventually when an industry benefits from a license for its activity, we also have a post-EIA monitoring. Also, industries which are not subjected to EIA because the undertakings are listed in the EPA, they are subjected to what we call an industrial waste audit. Like they have to submit an environmental monitoring plan to the Ministry of Environment. And then from this, we will assess what types and how much waste they are generating. And then we'll recommend what can be done for the betterment of the environment. And then we keep on monitoring. Industries which existed prior to the promulgation of the EIA, they don't require an EIA as such, but we also came up with what we call the effluent discharge permit. The effluent discharge permit is a mechanism that we use to control the effluent generated by the industry. But we have noted that, unfortunately, it's very difficult to comply to the national environmental standards as prescribed by EPA. So, unfortunately, on this side, we have noted that this is one of the big deficiencies, that not many industries have an effluent discharge permit, and this is something that we need to work on. We also have the WMA regulations. It is the Wastewater Management Authority. It regulates all the effluent that is released in the sewer network and eventually treated. So they also have some standards with regards to what type of effluent can be discharged in their network. And then in terms of activities, we have textiles, we have dye houses, we have distilleries, food and dairy processing, slaughterhouses, galvanizing plants, pharmaceutical industries. So these are some of the activities that we have in the country. And then for the wastewater, as I mentioned, we also have this wastewater management regulations of 2019 regulating the wastewater discharge in the sewerage network. Then on the next slide, I will talk about the good practices on reduction of nitrates, waste from agricultural and other land-based sources. So in Mauritius, under the Ministry of Agriculture, we have an institute which is called the Food and Agricultural Extension Research and Agricultural Extension Institute. Their objective is to carry out farmer-oriented applied research for development and they support the farming community for non-sugar crop and livestock production through their extension services. So we have the good agricultural practices. This is coming up in Mauritius. Like I mentioned earlier, we have the Moragap standards, we have the biofarming scheme, and then we also have the compost subsidy scheme, which is to retrieve all the waste generated by farmers and industries alike, to encourage them to go for composting. We also have to review the fertilizer in crops. So presently we are using a lot of synthetic fertilizers, but biofertilizers is not something that is very common. But we hope that this is something that will gain momentum in a short while, because we have the master plan on environment, which intends to boost up the use of biofertilizers. Recently, also, the Ministry of Environment came up with the circular economy. We have also enacted the Circular Economy and Act. And this is already something that has been enacted, but it is not being yet applied. So through the circular economy, we intend to use all the waste generated and other raw material for other activities. And this is coming up as a strategy, and hopefully in short, by next year, it will start to gain momentum. So we're also aiming to improve on our waste management by diverting 70% of solid waste from the country's saturated landfill. We only have one landfill in Mauritius, and all the solid waste currently is going to the landfill. So we intend to divert it through circularity, and then we intend to also boost it by recycling our waste. With regards to FARE, the Food and Agricultural Research and Extension Institute, they are already doing some training campaigns for farmers on sustainable use of fertilizers. So they have regular capacity building and training to farmers on good agricultural practices. They're also in the development of agricultural climate smart practices. I know there are a few projects which have already started with the farmers, that is to use smart technologies in the application of fertilizers, like with the Internet of Things sensors, and then to make it more sustainable way to use fertilizers. And also the Ministry of Environment is encouraging a lot of composting and using organic agri-waste and recycling at research and farm level. Biofarming is something that is also gaining momentum. So what are the harmful effects that we have noted in Mauritius with regards to nitrogen specifically? So in Mauritius, I will talk firstly about the air quality. You know, as I mentioned, we already have a network of ambient air quality monitoring stations. And we also have an air quality index that is accessible to the population. So they can consult it at any time. And what we have noted is that in the past few weeks, unfortunately, we have had high levels of ozone, and all the other parameters were of very good at acceptable level and complying to our standard. But unfortunately, what we noted is that ground level ozone was a concern. So this is something that put our air quality index on the red alert for quite some time. And what was the cause is that this was because of ozone. So ozone formation, as many of you are probably aware, you need to have oxides of nitrogen. This can be generated by a number of sources like vehicular emissions, stack emissions from industries, and also ozone formation. Normally it can also be transboundary. So our source of ozone, we do not know in fact where it is coming from. But unfortunately, like I'm mentioning, all other parameters besides oxides of nitrogen is already very good in Mauritius. The only issue is we are facing a high level of ozone. So it appears like we are mostly facing some transboundary ozone issues in Mauritius. Secondly, we also have some algal blue problems. As I mentioned, the industry in Mauritius, one of the major industries is the tourism sector. So in the eastern part of the island, we have noted that we have algal proliferation. This has been ongoing for something like 15 years, but is very seasonal. So in the eastern part of the island, we know that there is some algal issues. And you will see in the picture that is on the shared screen of the PowerPoint presentation, this is one of the beaches in the eastern side, so it's actually becoming a problem. At some point in time, the Ministry of Environment was funding the removal and scraping off of all these algae and then trying to dispose of them. But unfortunately, this is not something that is sustainable. So we are trying to investigate on the exact sources of nitrogen. So for this, we have recently devised an environmental monitoring program comprising of seawater quality monitoring, groundwater and surface water, specifically for that catchment and that region. And we are also trying to involve other laboratories, but it's going to start. And we intend to use like stable isotope techniques and nitrogen 15 testing to determine on the exact source of the nitrogen, and then we will try to address same. So, and then thirdly, what we have noted is that Mauritius, I would just like to mention that we are 50% of our water, they come from our groundwater, is tapped for domestic distribution, industrial use. So in the northern part of the island, what we have noted is that we have a high nitrate level in groundwater in the northern part of the island. And this is something that is exceeding the drinking water limits. So what we are doing now is that our Central Water Authority, which is responsible for distribution, they have had to dilute it with other fresh water, which is poor in nitrate, and then trying to dilute it to bring it within the levels prescribed in our drinking water standards level. And now the challenges that we are facing. I mean, Mauritius is a very small country, so we have like something like outdated legislations and regulations. We have our Environment Protection Act. So our Environment Protection Act was enacted in 2002. It was revised in 2008. And now it is currently in revision. So the most important revision is about the protection of environmentally sensitive areas, and also about strategic environmental assessment. We also have something like for climate change. So this is all being incorporated in the new revised version of the Environment Protection Act. So we do not have a single policy or enactment to address nitrogen. It's not integrated like in developed countries. Unfortunately, it is at this stage in Mauritius, we'll still have fragmented policies and legislation for addressing nitrogen-related issues. But of course, we intend to go forward like for a voluntary action plan, as recommended by the expert working group on nitrogen. On the institutional side, we also have a lot of duplication. As mentioned, we have the Environment Protection Act. Which also makes mention for enforcing agencies, but unfortunately there is sometimes a duplication, and then the real problem is not addressed by the right enforcing agencies. So we need to have the proper institutional setup which can cater for an enforcement whenever we have problems related to wastewater or air quality. Also on the human resource side, we also have difficulties in enforcement and monitoring for compliance verification for industries whenever we do post-EIE monitoring, so post-environmental impact assessment monitoring. So on this side, we do have some human resource deficiency. So we need to strengthen the capacity of the ministry and other ministries as well for more compliance verification. And one of the biggest challenges, I think, like it's very common for all the countries. I mean, it's related to the funding. In Mauritius, in the beginning, when we started to implement the National Sewerage Program, we were benefiting from the funding from the European Union. So this was stopped something like some years ago. Now it's being sustained by our own budget, but unfortunately, we are not able to move at the same pace. So the extension of our sewerage network has taken some delays. Also now Mauritius is implementing, we are trying to implement sustainable transportation because we are very much dependent on our vehicles in Mauritius. This is like a very cultural thing. Every Mauritians, they want to have their own cars. But now, as I mentioned, we have come up with the light railway transit system. And unfortunately, the coverage is still limited to some major cities, and it's not over the full island, but we intend to extend it over the coming years to the entire island. And also the contribution of renewable energy production in Mauritius is quite limited. We have some mix of coal and bagasse, which is generated from sugarcane cultivation. We also have some photovoltaic. Wind energy is at the moment very limited. So as a tropical country, I mean, we can go on this renewable energy production. The vision of the government is to have 40% of our energy coverage, energy production and demand met by renewable energy by 2030. So 40% of the renewable energy production should be by 2030 for renewable energy production. So on the way forward, what we are looking at is that we want to have continued support from UNEP to the expert working group on sustainable nitrogen management, because this is what is going to support us in the development of the National Action Plan for Sustainable Nitrogen Management in Mauritius, because we do not also have much expertise. So on this side, we will also request to continue to provide the expertise in the development of the National Action Plan and its implementation, and also to provide access to funding and expertise should be eased out, and priority support should be considered for developing countries, like for Mauritius, which is a small island developing state, and for the implementation of our National Action Plan. So on this note, I will end up my presentation, and I will thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both our co-presenters from Mauritius. Here is some echo. Yeah, I think now it's working. Really interesting to see the images you provided on the algal blooms along the coastline. You know, just making the nitrogen challenge very visible, just like, for example, the sargassum challenge in the Caribbean, and also really great to see your efforts you undertaking to monitor seawater quality, for example, and just identifying the nitrogen sources. You also mentioned the mitigation of environmental impacts associated with wastewater. So also just using the opportunity and provide some links to a report we recently launched on wastewater, turning problem to solution, and also an event we recently held discussing nutrient recovery from wastewater. So we provide some further links on that also in the chat for those participants who are interested in the topic. And yes, it looks like we have come to the end of all presentations. Sorry that we are a little bit over time. Of course, first of all, I would like to thank all our presenters for their contributions, and now hand over to my colleague Wanjiru Edna, who's seated just beside me, and she will moderate the Q&A session.
Thank you, Sarah. Sorry. Yes, thank you once again. Thank you to our speakers for your presentation. It was very educational. So my name is Wanjiru Edna, and I work at the Source to Sea Pollution Unit at UNEP. We'll now begin the Q&A session with the first question going to Mihai. The question is, if my country has several existing plans relevant to the parts of the nitrogen challenge, does that mean a new national action plan for nitrogen can be shorter, focusing on linking between the issues? What would be your guidance?
Thank you for the
Mihai?
question. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Do you hear me? Yes, great.
Yes, we can
Thank
hear
you for the question. I believe in case that the several actions or several programs, if the several programs are well prepared, I still believe there is a need like a kind of master plan. So it will be good to be under an umbrella. And still, there are synergies. I think we are now at the global level looking at the connections, looking at the synergies, and we should be able to connect better the dots between different type of nitrogen compounds and climate change, biodiversity, water quality, environment. So in case that the policies on different sectors or on different nitrogen compounds are developed, still an interministerial committee to look at ways to further integrate the policies and to look for synergies. I think it should be useful, but I would not say there is a need of a national action plan. It's just it's at a different level. Integration is the next word. Thank you.
Thank you, Mihai. The next question goes to Ward and Svenja. There were news about major protests of farmers in the Netherlands. Would you please discuss what were their major demands and how your government is responding to the same? Thank you.
Yes, thanks for this question from Pakistan. It's true in 2019 and also the years after, we have seen protests from farmers here in The Hague, but also throughout the country. I think the most important reason for this protest is that the agricultural sector also felt it was a bit unfair that for all the nitrogen deposition on our nature reserves, they were held accountable, because there are also other sectors that play a part. So the new rules of the government that were announced in 2020, I think, were mainly focusing on the agricultural sector, which as the biggest contributor was the logic behind it, but they felt it was solely targeted at them, and they also felt that the objectives that they got were too stringent, and also they had to achieve them too fast. Like the goals of this government were set on 2030, that we need to achieve certain objectives. And that has a very severe impact on the agricultural sector and on farmers. And we set the goals, but we didn't really give tools how to achieve them. So I think overall, it was just this unbalance that we mainly look to the agricultural sector, and that the objectives that we set were, according to them, too stringent and had too much impact. So what we did is that we also tried to come to an arrangement with them. So the last month we negotiated on an agricultural agreement in which the government tried to come to a common approach. That didn't work out, so we didn't manage to reach a deal. And now, well, we had elections last week. The new government should decide on how to continue.
Thank you, Ward and Svenja. The next question goes to Dindial and Ravina. In your experience, what has been the most prominent financial issue while undertaking sustainable nitrogen management and formulation of national action plans?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes. Okay, so the most prominent, I think, with regards to the financial issue in Mauritius, we are a small country, so the budget is very limited. We are still a developing country. And I think the more attention is focused on climate change issue at the moment. So all the funding is at the moment on the environmental side. I mean, it's all going to the climate change adaptation and mitigation. In Mauritius, I'm not very familiar with the farmers, but because I mostly work in the environmental sector. But for them, it's just like more nitrogen. It's like more food production. So for them, this is the issue. And they are not very sensitized about the problem that we are facing globally with nitrogen management. So I think they also need to be more focused with the stakeholders. But where to draw the money, which is mostly being diverted to the climate change funding. So I think this still needs some discussion at the national level. I hope I answered the question.
Yes, thank you so much. Because of time, we'll refer all your questions to the speakers and panelists, and we'll share them with you once they've been compiled after the webinar. So I'll give it back to Sarah to continue.
Thank you, Wanjiru. And thank you so much to all presenters and participants and for the Q&A session. As Wanjiru mentioned, we're not able to address all questions at this point, but we'll obviously reflect the discussions in the summary brief that we will share together with the recording after the meeting. With that, and in the interest of time, because we only have 3 minutes left, I now have the pleasure to invite my colleague Stephanie van der Poel to deliver the closing remarks of today's webinar.
Thank you, Sarah. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
All right. Excellent. On behalf of the Secretariat of the Global Partnership on Nutrient Management, I would like to thank the panelists from the Netherlands and Mauritius for sharing best practices and lessons learned on national actions taken to address the nitrogen challenge. I also wish to thank the co-chair of the UNEP Working Group on Nitrogen for providing an overview on the work conducted so far by the working group on the development of voluntary national action plans. As it was mentioned earlier today by the chair of the Global Partnership on Nutrient Management on his opening remarks, the topics discussed today during this webinar will continue to contribute to discussions of the UNEP Working Group on Nitrogen in the lead up to its next meeting in January 9 to 10 here in Nairobi in hybrid, and also in the lead up to the 6th session of the UN Environment Assembly. Lastly, I wish to thank all participants that have joined today's webinar on national action plans. Thank you for your time and for being with us today. Thank you.